Friends, we live at a time of radical existential risk. And existential risk means risk to our essential existence. We might call this the shock of existence. And by the shock of existence, what we mean is that actually existence itself, existential risk, is in peril. Now, what does that mean? And people have asked, myself and my other colleagues at the Center for Integral Wisdom so many times over the last year, as we've been so deep in this conversation, isn't that always true? Haven't people from time immemorial said we're faced with cataclysmic challenge, the end of days, Armageddon, right? Some doomsday scenario. Isn't this the same thing we say in every generation? Well, it is. But as I wrote together with my colleague, Zach Stein, right, in an upcoming book, right, everyone says it's true, but it is true about us. You get it? Everyone says it's true, but we're right. And why are we right? But we don't want to be right. We're right because no matter what Attila the Hun would have done, Attila the Hun couldn't take the world down. On a bad decade, he could be a scourge and inflict horrific suffering. But he did not have the power to destroy the world. For the first time in the history of planet Earth, we have the power to destroy life as we know it on planet Earth. Now, we can get used to those words, and they become kind of a background drum roll, right? A background monotone that we ignore, but it's real. Right? There are actually 7 or 8 major arenas of existential risk in the economic realm, particularly in the financial markets, how finances work, right? In the realm of weapons, right? In the potential of rogue weapons, right? In 4 or 5 dimensions of the environmental realm. And in each of these realms, there are potential existential risks which conflagrate with the potential to first collapse the structures as we know them, but then to destroy life. To actually destroy life, right, as we know it. Right? The financial realm, the economic realm, can't destroy life. It can collapse our systems. But rogue terrorist bombs, right, in 4 or 5 different profound, right, environmental threats can actually destroy the entire system as we know it. Wow, that's a big deal. So then the second question is always, well, what are we supposed to do with that information? That is not motivating, right? A board member and a close friend, right, said in a recent conversation, right, that's not motivating. Right? When I think about existential risk, when I think about the shock of existence, and a colleague from Holland has pointed out correctly that there was a first shock of existence. Malice has pointed this out. There was a first shock when the human being emerges as a separate self, and we're not sure, oh my God, there's death in the system. The second shock of existence is when we realize that after we've developed all of our responses to death, which is all of human culture for thousands of years, we're now facing, not, as Zach and I write, not the death of the person, but the death of the species, or the death of humanity, right? The skull is grinning at the banquet once again. Mount calls it the second shock of existence, right? But we can just call it the shock of existence today. The shock of existence today is that existence is threatened. And it's threatened in this powerful, right, and potent way. But then my good friend says, what am I supposed to do about that? That's not motivating. Right? How am I supposed to use that, right, to engage? Well, the answer is we got to actually look carefully at how we actually understand and take in the existential threat. We actually absorb it into our systems, but in a way which inspires us, which motivates us, which enlivens us, which eroticizes us, right, in the sense of eros being the experience of being radically alive and moving towards ever greater contact and creativity, instead of deadening us, right, and shutting us down. So let's go a couple of steps. Existential risk is real, number 1. Number 2, it has not been so since time immemorial. It's a completely new reality. That's number 2. Right? Number 3, right, this shock of existence, we need to find a way for it to enliven us, ennoble us, right, wake us up, right, motivate us instead of shutting us down, right? Number 3. Number 4, not only is the shock of existence this new set of existential threats that have never existed, but number 4 is another new dimension, which is qualitatively and quantitatively, there's more suffering in the world than there ever was in the history of planet Earth. Now, that's true despite the fact that capitalism has beautifully, and what John Mackey calls in his book Conscious Capitalism, right, has actually, from a statistical point of view, decreased poverty, right, increased greatly a middle class, right, increased possibility, right, increased education, increased medical benefit. That's all true. However, right, there's many, many more people in the world, my friends. There's billions more people in the world today than there were in 1800. So all of a sudden, there's 2 billion people below the poverty line suffering. That's just objectively, wildly more suffering, right, than ever existed right on planet Earth. That's shocking. That's a big deal. That's number 4. And number 5, point 5 is we know more. We know more about that suffering than we ever have. Right? The amount that we know today about suffering in the world, only God knew, right, 100 years ago. 100 years ago, only God knew, right, the level and depth of suffering in every corner of the world. Now, we don't know the depth and level of suffering in every corner of the world, but through CNN, right, through the internet, right, through a decentralized set of multiple feeds, right, in every region of the world, feeding information, right, into the internet, we have availability to both graphic images and substantive detailed information, right, about suffering in a way that was previously unavailable in every other generation in history. And the question is, what does that do? Does that motivate us? Does that open our hearts? Or does that close us down? And as we've seen, it closes us down. Right? We ignore it. Just like we ignore existential risk. We shut existential risk out and we worry about, the kind of often, beautiful, poignant, and sometimes silly and petty and contracted challenges of our lives and our egos. And we ignore existential risk. And we ignore the shock of existence. And we ignore the quantitative and qualitative exponential increase in the actual amount of suffering in the world, right? And we ignore the fact that we have a greater responsibility than anyone ever had before because, right, A, we know about it. We become almost divinely omniscient. Omniscient meaning all-knowing. We actually know in a way that only God knew. This is our 5th point 100 years ago. But we're also potentially omnipotent. We have the capacity to engage it. Now, let me give you an example, right? That's the first 5 steps. I want to go to step 6. To take step 6, I want to talk about why we're not pessimistic, right? Why actually this information is energizing. Why it's not shutting us down. It should download into us, right, an energized aliveness. Fear, the word fear in Hebrew, right, is also called consciousness. Yirah means divine consciousness, also means fear. Why is that? You ever been to a horror movie? Why do people go to horror movies? I went to one. Oh my God, I ran out of there. Like, oh my God, really? Do I really need to see someone chainsawed right down the center? And I won't go into another graphic description. It's horrific. I'm looking around the theater and it's filled with people and they're like, yeah. Like, oh my God, were they all psychotics? Maybe, but probably not, right? So why do people go to a horror movie? Well, people go to a horror movie because when you're in fear, you're alive, right? So you're living your life. All of a sudden, you're in the horror movie, like, ah, right? But you're alive. But you actually feel your aliveness. There's a rush of dopamine and a whole cocktail of neurochemicals and transmitters, right, coming alive, right? Serotonin's kind of ripping through your body, right? And you feel adrenaline pumping. You're alive. And so people go to a horror movie to experience fear for the experience of aliveness. But if we could actually take, following the original Hebrew play in which consciousness and fear are the same words, what if we actually just become conscious? right? Now, we take the fear in, because the fear is real. Right? We can't deny the fear. When you deny the fear, right, the fear appears as all sorts of malaises and symptoms. Does everyone get that? You see what I mean? Right? And if you deny the fear, you push it down, right? The fear of existential risk, right? The fear of suffering, right? The pain of suffering, you push it down and deny it, it appears in every form of mental illness and every form of disease and heart attack. The heart is actually attacked. So we need to take the fear in, but then to transform the fear into consciousness so that the fear causes us to be enlivened, right? To be motivated, right? To be inspired, right? To begin breathing in and feeling in and speaking in and acting into this reality. Now, what does that mean? So let's go step 6. So step 6, let me cite a book. It's a book which at the Center for Integral Wisdom, we use as a core text. It's a great text. And it was written by Ramiz Nam, who I've actually never met, I don't know. The book is called The Infinite Resource. And we talked about it several years ago, but at the board meeting, there's a number of books in this genre. You know, there must be a couple of dozen. I happen to like Ramiz's book a lot. And he goes through, you know, the 7 or 8 major fields, arenas of existential risk, you know, one after the other. And he does it in a sober, you know, realistic and devastating way. And then after Nam goes through all of this significant, unparalleled in history, existential risk, he then says, I'm not that worried though. I'm optimistic. Are you crazy? Why are you optimistic? Well, I'm optimistic because, and essentially you can sum up the second half of the book in one word: innovation. Innovation. And what does that mean? Well, let's take a particular example. Take books from the end of the 60s, early 70s, and the end of the 20th century on, for example, population explosion. There was a book called The Population Bomb, another one I think called The Limits of Growth, a whole literature and on the danger of population explosion, which lots of us grew up deeply, deeply in that fear. Population explosion would cause massive famine and the world would completely starve. Famine would engulf the world. Now, what happened? The trajectories predicted of population growth, which should have caused famine to engulf the world, those trajectories were actually fulfilled. They actually happened. It's not that we actually managed to really stop population growth. We didn't at all. It actually exceeded many of our predictions. But the famine didn't materialize. That global, destructive, engulfing world famine didn't happen. Why? Innovation. Because we figured out how to actually innovate in our production of food, how to take a particular measurement of land, right, X measurement that used to yield X amount of food, and through innovation in technology, creative innovation, to actually yield from that land much, much higher amount of food. And then we learned how to store the food, how to ship the food more effectively. So innovation, which was a new variable, right, which was the emergence of the creativity of the cosmos intersecting with the mechanical statistics, actually turned the story around. Now, stay with me. People like Nam or Peter Diamandis and a host of other writers who I like to call techno optimists. Right? These techno optimists, their basic deal is it's going to be good. We're going to connect another billion people to the internet. We're going to unleash an entire new wave of innovation and the world will be good. Well, that is true, but enormously partial. Because the mistake that Nam makes and the mistake that Diamandis makes, and Nam makes it all over the book, right, is that he thinks about innovation purely in terms of interiors. And innovation is an interior. Okay, let's step back. Okay, right? Nam, I just made a mistake, so I'm going to correct that. Okay, here we go. Right? Nam thinks about innovation not in terms of interiors. He thinks about innovation purely in terms of exteriors. Okay? And Lisa, I'm making this recording with Lisa Engels. Lisa, we don't need to cut that out. We can just leave the mistake in and say it again. Totally fine. Okay, mistakes are okay. Right? Nam thinks about innovation purely in terms of exteriors. And innovation in terms of exteriors doesn't cut it. Now, I remember when I was a kid, and I call this the Epcot fallacy. When I was a kid, I went to see Epcot. Epcot is in Florida, and it's this vision of the future. And I remember being very struck walking into these, future 21st century families. We've got this wonderful father and mother, and they're smiling, these beautiful kids. And apparently the cause of this is all these new appliances or all this technological innovation, right? And you realize, I remember looking at it and realized, I remember in my young child's mind, I realized they're making a mistake here. This is the Epcot fallacy, right? That is to say, they're assuming that new innovations in technology are going to produce these happy families. But having come from an unhappy family, I knew very, very well that new innovations in technology do not produce happy families. New innovations in interiors produce happy families, right? So Nam, right, Diamantes, and the entire school of Techno optimists, right, they make a mistake, which is exterior absolutism. I mean, they only value truly the exterior quadrants of reality, and they locate innovation in those exterior quadrants. But actually, in order to shift the world, the quadrants, meaning the exterior quadrants of reality and the interior quadrants, need to tetramesh. A tetramesh means all four quadrants, all the interiors of individuals and the interiors of society, which is culture, and the exterior of every individual, meaning the physical body, the actions, and the exterior meaning the mechanisms of government and distribution, etc., right, of the collective. The exteriors of the collective and the interiors of the collective, the exteriors of the individual, the interiors of the individual, meaning all four quadrants of reality need to innovate. And all four quadrants tetramesh. If the quadrants were too complex for you at this point, press delete. Here's the basic idea. Interiors and exteriors both need to innovate. So for example, what was the Renaissance? The Renaissance changed the course of human history. What is the Renaissance? The Renaissance, where Da Vinci is sitting and thinking about the world. So Da Vinci is innovating in all four quadrants. He's innovating in his experience of sexuality. Da Vinci was a radical post-conventional sexual adventurer. He's innovating in his vision of how government, right, when he writes and thinks about government, he's innovating technologically, he's creating new weapons, right? And, right, he's innovating in his vision, his story of the cosmos. The Renaissance, right, is innovating on all levels, but at the very core of the Renaissance, right, what's driving the entire story is interior innovation, right? A new world story. And Michelangelo and the entire school, right, of Renaissance artists, right, introduced this new vision of reality, out of which ultimately emerges the scientific method, right, which emerges democracy, right, which emerges, and from the period of time of the Renaissance to the Western Enlightenment, you've got about 100 years in which every society in the world abolishes slavery. Well, why? Innovation in interiors, a new vision of man and woman, a new vision of the human being. So innovations in interiors change the whole story. The Renaissance, the Western Enlightenment, the introduction of democracy, human rights, right, a new vision of the social contract, the purpose of the human being in the world, the relationship of the community to the individual. These are all innovations in interiors, or what we might call new memes, or new mimetic structures, or new structures of consciousness. However you want to tell the story, right? The development of new levels of consciousness, right, is innovation in interiors. Now, how do we respond to existential risk? First off, we take it seriously. Existential risk is real in this generation, number one. Right, number two, the level of suffering is unparalleled, right, to any previous generation, simply because of the amount of people suffering. Right? Number three, we know about it. But number four, we have the capacity. We're not just omniscient. We don't have just a divine level of omniscience, a kind of almost all-knowingness. We have an almost, right? But it's not really almost. There's a huge chasm, but I'm speaking metaphorically. We have this almost omnipotence, at least at a human level, which is we have huge capacity. And what's our huge capacity? To innovate. So Ramiz Nam is optimistic because of innovation, but he shouldn't be optimistic just because of innovation on the exterior level. We've got to innovate on interiors, on the interior level. So the entire vision of the Center for Integral Wisdom is to participate in evolving the source code of culture and consciousness. That's what we want to do. To evolve the source code, not just the desktop, but the core structures of consciousness that drive the entire story on the interior levels, and to speak, and there's key people in the center who speak very powerfully to exteriors, right? To how we can actually innovate and change, right, on the exterior levels, right, of the entire structure of the human being, and how the human being can be appropriately interfered with, right, through evolving, right, our physical structures and our neurostructures and our biotech structures, right? So we need to innovate exteriors and interiors. Our core focus in the center right now is interior innovation. What does that mean? It means telling a new world story. We need, right, a story that's equal to our power. We need a new story that's equal to our new power. We need to innovate a new vision of reality. And that's everything. That's our entire commitment. But it's not a, my mother in Yiddish would say parva, nicht dahin, nicht daher. Meaning, oh, we should do this, is really exciting, it's important. No, existential risk, my friends. We can be completely destroyed. That's absolutely, totally real. Right? The level of existential risk, right? The skull grins at the banquet. There's a shock of existence, what Mao called the second shock. But we're not talking about the death of an individual human being. It's not that death has entered. It's that the death of society, the death of reality has entered. So we need to actually wake up. We need to grow up. We need to show up. We need to clean our act up. We need to open our hearts, right? And actually say, this is real. And we need to be urgent in our response to it. It needs to override our petty concerns. And it needs to override, right, the conflicts that are just nonsense. And it needs to override, right, all of our egoic strivings disguised as noble motives. We need to come together. And friends, the difference between love and malice are flip opposites. Malice, politics, ego, pettiness, right, versus love, right? Why are they different? Love is about attracting together parts in order to form, right, a larger whole. Parts come together. The parts form a larger whole that's synergistically superior, right? Synergy means the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. As our friend Daniel would say, it's ontologically orthogonal, right? Meaning it's completely distinct. It's what we call an emergent, right? It's an emergent. Zach and I are writing, this is one of Zach's innovations about social miracles. What are the social miracles? Meaning what are the new emergents necessary that never existed before? Innovations in interiors, right, that actually create an entirely new reality, which is synergistically greater than the sum of the parts. What drives that? Love. Love attracts. Love allures. Love brings parts and people together to create something more whole and more deep and more wise. And love does that when we rest together in being. It does it when we stop talking. It does it when we feel that we share the same beingness. We feel we share the same qualia of life, the same quality of life. We share the same depth. We're all part of the same true self, right? We breathe the same air on the interior level. We're all part of the same great organism of being. We're not only interconnected as it's, not just systems theory, chaos theory, and complexity theory. We're interconnected, but the interior of interconnectivity is intimacy. So we're not just interconnected, we're intimate. We live in an intimate universe. And the core structure of an intimate universe is nothing exists independently of everything. Right? There is nothing that exists independently of everything. Everything creates everything. You get it? There's nothing separate, nothing apart, right? Nothing alone. That's true not just on the exterior level. Remember, the interior of interconnectivity is intimacy. That's true on the interior level. So we live in an intimate universe. So wow, right? That's a very, very big deal. So we got to get that in a deep way. And once we get that in a deep way, right? Once we get that we live in this intimate universe, we can begin from this place of intimacy, right? We begin to innovate. We begin to create new structures. And those new structures are new structures of identity, right? Which we call unique self. And new structures of politics and community, which we call unique self symphony. And a new narrative reality, which we call the universe, a love story, right? And we introduce structures called evolutionary eros. We introduce new structures of relationship and new structures of government, synergistic democracy. And each one of these words has enormous depth and enormous meaning. And we reclaim, right, an evolutionary story in which we realize that evolution is awakening in us. Evolution is not a process out there. Evolution awakens as us in person. We are ceaselessly innovating through the leading edge of our own being. Then we come together in unique self-symphonies and we ceaselessly innovate, both in interiors and exteriors, all the way up and all the way down. Right? That's excitement. But that's in response to existential risk. So we're moved by urgency. But the urgency doesn't shut us down. The urgency is ecstatic. It's ecstatic urgency. Once we root ourselves in being, we experience the pulse and throb and the lure of becoming moving through us. And we respond to the fear by letting the fear enliven us in order to draw out of ourselves, to draw from our lips a new hallelujah, and a new hallelujah of creativity, a new hallelujah of consciousness, right? A new possibility. Because that's what God is. God is that which we live inside of, right? The personal face of reality that holds us, the infinity of intimacy, right? And God is the lure of becoming, and God is the possibility of possibility, the strange attractor that draws us forward. So wow. So who are we, right, as a Center for Integral Wisdom? Who is our great we? And our great we is not just if you happen to be a board member, which is awesome, right? You happen to be a scholar, which is awesome, but come and join us, right? It's an us, right? The Center for Integral Wisdom isn't one person centric, right? It's a unique self-symphony filled with musicians and rock stars and artists and poets and scientists and innovators and sociologists and anthropologists and spirit people, right, of every kind. Come and join and let's innovate together. Let's be a unique self-symphony together, but not just because it's cute, not just because we enjoy it, because we actually take existential risk seriously. That's what it means to shatter our narcissism. That's what it means to open our eyes. That's what it means to actually wake up, and here's the last point, and to actually become enlightened. Because you see, the only response, right, to genuine existential risk is to shift our consciousness. To shift our consciousness, what have we called it? We've called it evolution. We've called it innovation on the interior level. What's the ultimate innovation on the interior level? What we call enlightenment. But not just enlightenment. Enlightenment is the knowledge that we live in an intimate universe, that we're unique expressions of that intimate universe, right? Enlightenment is the knowledge that we have only one question to the answer. We have only one answer to the question. One answer to the question. Question to the answer, answer to the question. One answer to the question of who are you? Who are you? Right? You're a unique self, right? You're an irreducible, unique expression of the love, intelligence, and love beauty that is the initiating and animating eros of all that is, that lives in you, as you and through you, that never was, is, or will be ever again other than through you. And as such, you have an irreducible, unique perspective, which manifests your unique capacity to give your unique gift that is desperately needed by all that is, and is particularly needed in your unique circle of intimacy and influence. And as such, you realize that you stand on the abyss of darkness, and you can say, let there be light, and your unique frequency of light can speak and shine light into that darkness, love into that unlove, in a way that no one that ever was, is, or will be can do other than you. And to do so, right, is the very purpose, the very telos and eros of your telerotic life. It's your obligation, but obligation in the sense of the natural explosion and ecstatic urgency of your love intelligence. Wow. And that's true for every human being. And to awaken to that reality where I know I'm inseparable from the all lives in me, and I'm a unique expression of the all, and the all needs me. Reality intended me. Reality loves me. Reality needs me. Reality adores me, with the four truths of unique self, the four noble truths. To know that is to become enlightened. But enlightenment is no longer the province of the few. We're talking about democratizing enlightenment. To democratize enlightenment means the ultimate innovation in interiors. Enlightenment means there are no externalities. That's what enlightenment means. There are no externalities. Wow. Now, this understanding is not mine, right? It's ours. It's emergent from our collective intelligence. Because collective intelligence, like Bitcoin, right, in the realm of commodities/currency, right, collective intelligence is the new level of emergent intimacy in the world, because the world is the trajectory of the evolution of love, which is the evolution of intimacy. So let's come together. Friends, let's be urgent about it. Let's give more. Let's give more on every level. Let's give more materially. Let's give more emotionally. Let's give more existentially. Let's release more contraction than we've ever done before. Let's get over ourselves in ways that we've never done before. Let's give up being right. Let's be fearless. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And let's love each other. And let's love each other madly, right? Outrageously. Outrageous love is evolutionary love. It's love that moves the entire story. Friends, we live in a world of outrageous pain. That's true. The only response to outrageous love, right? The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love, right? The only response to outrageous pain, right, is outrageous love. And outrageous love means each one of us awakens as an outrageous lover, as an enlightened being, right? The Buddhists would say as a bodhisattva, right? The Jews would say as a tzaddik, as a righteous one, It's not about one person. It's not the sage from the stage. It's not the rabbi in front of the synagogue who's like, my synagogue, right, my church. No, we're a unique self-symphony. It's our turn. We're going to move forward together as a band of enlightened ones. Democratized enlightenment. Wow. Can you imagine that? Wow. That's what we're about, friends. Let's do it together. Let's do it together. Let's love each other madly. Let's love it open. Man, thank you, everyone.